Hi, it's Gareth at SIOAAA talking about enterprise service management. Yes, I'm jumping two-footed on the bandwagon. Like I said in my recent AI video, it doesn't take too long to scroll through your LinkedIn feed and see a post about the virtue of these big topics, and ESM is another one of those, it seems. So here's a short video from me on this very subject. Now, I've been aware of this, I'd say, emerging trend for a couple of years now. I attended a ServiceNow event in November 2017 where I was introduced to the Verizon body of work, and it made a lot of sense. Now, I'm not going to cover today the in-depth ins and outs of ESM. Why? Well, frankly, because there's so much good content out there already. I'd really recommend the Service Management Social video on this subject available on YouTube. One of the main reasons for this channel is it not for it to be some dude in an ivory tower telling you how services should be run, but more so to try and offer practical insights into how you can make use, adapt these big topics, these practices, and ultimately benefit your IT services, operations, teams, and customers. So, ESM. So, a quick summary of my understanding of what we mean when we say enterprise service management for those of you that have maybe heard the phrase but are unsure what it means to you. So, IT departments are not the only function within a business that deliver services to that business. Lots of companies all over the globe have support or operational functions, finance, HR, payroll, facilities, marketing, CSR, internal comms, the score. Maybe not directly linked to the company's USP, but essential in supporting the company to allow them to deliver their USP. And much like IT, those functions in effect are delivering a service back to the users within that company. However, how are those services delivered? How are they governed, managed, measured, and improved? Now, in IT and in most IT departments, there is a level of IT service management, no matter how well mature or evolved that is. And commonplace, as we know, that tends to be based on certain frameworks, ITIL being the standout. Now, that framework allows the entire IT department, not just the service desk, not just operations, to manage the entire life cycle of their IT services to their customers and users from a strategy, design, transition, operational and improvement perspective. Over the past 25 years or so, this approach has matured and evolved to the point where ITIL terminology is inherent. It's within most IT functions across the globe. However, for those other service providing functions, HR, finance, etc., there maybe hasn't been the same uniformity, common approach that we have benefited from within IT. That's not saying those functions in those businesses don't manage their services. Of course they do. But perhaps they and their sectors haven't benefited from a common service management approach that many, if not all IT departments have to some degree or the other. From what I know, ESM isn't simply picking up what we do in ITSM and applying it lock, stock and barrel to other functions, although applying applicable parts of how we do things in IT can be beneficial to those non-IT departments. For example, a lot of the big tooling providers have elements of their platforms that started out life as part of their core ITSM services and have been modified and tweaked to apply to other areas. For example, let's take the HR department. It's totally commonplace that a HR department in any business, just like an IT department, gets requests from users for stuff. Having the ability to present those HR service requests in a catalogue that users can select from, that then generate a workflow with set tasks to achieve the outcome within an SLA, which is then used to measure the effectiveness of how HR are handling such requests, well, that is a good thing. A company I worked at some years ago had combined their IT and facilities service desks that would log incidents, whether it was your laptop or the office vending machine that was experiencing an unplanned interruption to service. In that sense, at the most basic levels, it's really apparent where good practice used by IT for many years can benefit other service-based functions. But ESM isn't solely focused on the operations side of the service, just like IT service management is much, much broader than IT service operations. Yes, ESM can simply be described as taking what works well in ITSM and applying it elsewhere, but if that's all we did, well, what would we end up with? Well, potentially a few very well managed service management functions, all within the same business, but focused on their very specific area, ensuring that their function increases productivity, increases efficiency, increases user satisfaction, and crucially, provides value. My interpretation of genuine ESM is that enterprises apply a joined up, holistic, integrated approach to delivering all of their services to achieve collectively those things. And that is where materials such as Verism has started to be used really effectively. In so much, whether you're talking about the HR services, the IT service, the post-room service, there is a common lexicon, common approach, common strategy to ensuring value is co-created. So that can sound quite daunting, I guess, to those of us that work solely within the confines of IT service management. It can be challenging enough from an ITSM perspective to get everybody to play nice. So now we're saying we've got to go and tackle all those other departments too. I mean, are you kidding me? Well, true, it has to be said that adopting such an approach needs buy-in from all of those C-level individuals within any organisation. But who best to promote and champion that than the people that have been doing this sort of stuff for years anyway? And if you haven't guessed, that's most likely us, right? So where on earth to start on that journey? For me, there are two opportunities. Firstly, to get a seat at the table in order to influence this sort of positive business change. It goes without saying that the in-place IT service, and therefore the management of that service, needs to be adding value and be recognised as adding value. If your IT service isn't, why on earth is the CEO, CFO going to listen that this is a good thing if all the good stuff that can and should reside within ITSM isn't working for them? You're unlikely to listen to the salesman telling you all about their wonderful new products and services if your existing services from that salesperson's company are a pile of crap, right? Secondly, I think it's important to look for opportunities whereby joined up approaches between those differing service functions can provide real value with the end user in mind. Now, I mentioned previously about the joint IT and facility service desk. I don't think that is a particular good example of what I mean here. From a user perspective in that scenario, yes, they only had one number to remember, but after that initial entry point, the process for handling those tickets diverged and the services were managed completely in isolation. So let me try and give you what I think is a slightly better example. In one of my previous organisations, like every organisation, we had people joining and we had people leaving. And naturally, there was a HR process to onboard and offboard individuals, and within IT, there was a process to set up a new starter and decommission leavers. But those processes had been designed largely in isolation from one another. Both had great intent, get the user onboarded, but only from a HR perspective, only from an IT perspective. Invariably, issues arose where there was some dependency either process had on one another to achieve the outcome they needed to get to. For example, a recruiting manager would inform HR that they wanted to hire someone, and HR would kick off the process to get that person employed. Only for the recruiting manager, one day before the new person starts, wondering where their new hire's laptop was, only to realise it was on them to make sure they also started the IT onboarding process once HR confirmed they'd done all their bits. What that resulted in were escalations into IT to get that new laptop well inside the normally prescribed SLA, all a bit lastminute.com. Conversely, when a user was leaving the company, the line manager would tell HR, naturally, that the person had decided to move on, only to presume the IT elements would be included, or they would forget to inform IT that the kit and access would need to be revoked. That scenario led to a much more dangerous scenario occurring. In one instance, IT discovered that an individual had left the organisation. However, they had not returned their laptop, nor had their access been revoked because the IT leaver process hadn't been invoked. Now, IT had certain security protocols in place, such as accounts being locked after 30 days of non-access. However, this didn't necessarily address the risk that somebody now off the payroll in receipt of their P45 and final payslip could, if they wanted, access information they shouldn't and be in possession of corporate equipment. Of course, neither process by design would have wanted this scenario to be a reality, but their isolated way of delivering what they needed to the organisation presented very, very real risks and issues. So we embarked on a journey to address this with the service outcome in mind. We knew these two processes relied on one another, and therefore to achieve a successful outcome, both functions' requirements needed to be addressed, as well as those interacting with the process. For example, we quickly established that recruiting managers didn't want to, nor should have to, kickstart many processes to achieve just the one outcome, a new joiner being able to work on their first day. We also knew each process required something of the other at certain points, so we wanted to ensure the end-to-end process catered for these things and ensured the right things happened at the right time. Each process step had its own KPI, which we collectively between HR and IT measured for effectiveness. What we didn't want to happen is for either party to sit on a particular task, which then risked the rest of the task being able to complete when they needed to happen. We utilised our service management toolset to publish the new starter, not IT, not HR, but new starter request item, and built the workflow to go to the respective resources in the respective functions. We quickly dropped the, well, I'm from IT and I'm from HR approach we had previously, and collectively and collaboratively focused on the outcome we needed to achieve in order to deliver that service to our end users. If the process worked, it benefited us as a collective and of course the users involved. If it didn't work, then it wasn't, oh, HR have screwed it up again, or IT always get this wrong. It was our collective service management's job to put that right, measure the effectiveness, and make sure collectively, as enterprise service management, we were adding value. Now that started out as a collaboration between IT and HR using some fairly basic IT request management and ServiceNow capability, but it quickly grew to include other areas too. That new starter lever process quickly evolved to include other service functions that had a part to play in getting a new joiner set up. For example, getting the security badge to the building from the facilities team, and that element was also incorporated. Now having an integrated joiners, movers, levers process across all service functions, I get, isn't particularly groundbreaking, but every company I've ever worked for has to some degree had an element of their SML processes causing them grief. Every single one. And that is squarely down to isolated, siloed ways of working within those differing service functions. Even the best service management within the HR or finance or IT departments won't prevent you in certain scenarios for not being able to achieve the outcomes your users require, because part of that outcome is controlled or influenced by another service function. For me, enterprise service management is an answer to allow companies, organisations to overcome some of these day-to-day issues that steal our time, piss users off, even though that's no one's intention. Okay, now to encourage you to jump on the SIOAOA bandwagon. If you found this interesting or useful, please do give me a like. If you want to listen to me ramble about more IT service management stuff, or just witness the progress of my lockdown hairdo, please click the subscribe button. I've been Gareth at SIOAOA. If your enterprise service management is hanging, switch it off and on again.